Hello, and welcome to this presentation, Understanding Two-Way Radios, Stun, Revive, and Kill. In this presentation, we'll discuss how and why different tone sequences can be used to remotely disable or re-enable analog two-way radios. In analog two-way radio systems, stun, revive, and kill are usually implemented using different tone schemes, such as two-tone, five-tone, or DTMF. We won't describe these tone systems in detail in this presentation, so please see the separate presentations on each of these topics if you'd like to learn more about their structure and use. Two-way radios are often used in applications where confidentiality, availability, and security are important. Public safety services, such as police, fire, ambulance, etc., are good examples of this. Therefore, if a radio is lost or stolen, this can potentially lead to serious problems. The most important of these is eavesdropping or unauthorized monitoring of communications. This is particularly true in the case where communications could not be normally monitored, such as when scrambling or encryption are used. Another issue is spoofing, or the active impersonation of authorized users. For example, someone pretending to be a dispatcher or a first responder. And in some cases, lost or stolen radios are used simply to jam or interfere with communications by occupying the channels or frequencies. Unfortunately, it's usually either impractical or impossible to reprogram all of the other radios in a system each time a single radio is lost or stolen. It's therefore desirable to have a way to remotely disable a two-way radio over the air, either partially or entirely, and this function is commonly referred to as stun or kill. Very generally speaking, stunning is used to inhibit transmit, but the radio can be unstunned by means of another over-the-air command called revive. The biggest difference between stunning and killing a radio is that in most cases, killing makes the radio entirely non-functional. Furthermore, a killed radio usually cannot be revived over the air. It can only be unkilled by a dealer or manufacturer, and this typically requires special software and a cabled connection to the radio. That said, it's very important to note that there can be some variation between radios and manufacturers as to what happens when a radio is stunned or killed, so it's a good idea to consult the radio documentation regarding these functions. In most radios, the stun or kill function must be explicitly enabled, and the radio must have some kind of assigned ID. This is needed in order to specify which radio is to be stunned or killed. The stun, revive, and kill commands are normally sent over the air as audible tones, using common tone systems such as two-tone, five-tone, or DTMF. If a radio has stun or kill enabled and receives the tone sequence, often the radio's ID, it sounds an alert and/or displays a message, such as sorry, killed, etc. Once a radio has been stunned or killed, it will remain in that state even after a power cycle. And although radios typically require an over-the-air revive command to unstun them, or special programming to unkill them, some radios can be re-enabled by entering a password directly into the radio itself. The terms stun and kill normally refer to analog two-way radio systems, but similar functionality also exists in most digital two-way radio systems, for example, P25, Tetra, etc. In these systems, this functionality is commonly called inhibit. However, unlike analog radio systems, digital systems do not use audible in-band tones to inhibit and uninhibit radios, but rather use a digital command sent by a centralized management center or console. A similar digital command can then be used to uninhibit that radio, that is, to restore it to its normal functionality. Another difference between analog and digital systems is that many digital systems allow a network administrator to check on the status of a radio to see whether that particular radio has been inhibited. One other thing to note is that some inhibited radios will still continue to send their GPS or GNSS-derived location back to the network management center, which can help to facilitate retrieval of the missing radio. Before we end this presentation, let's look briefly at how stun, revive, and kill are tested. Most often this is done using a radio test set, which is connected via a cable to the radio under test. This test set is used to send the appropriate tone sequence to the radio under test, that is, a 2-tone, 5-tone, or DTMF sequence. It's worth recalling that a radio typically requires some kind of configuration before it can be remotely stunned or killed, so this should be checked before testing begins. After the tone sequence has been sent, the radio should be checked to see if the appropriate audible or visual indicators appear, as well as whether the transmit and/or receive functions have been properly inhibited. This can be done using the connected radio test set as well. This test setup can also be used to verify that the revive or unkill procedures can be used to restore normal functioning. Let's end with a brief summary. The ability to remotely disable an analog two-way radio is useful in many situations, and this process is commonly referred to as stunning or killing a radio. Stunning most often simply disables transmit and can be undone by sending a revive command over the air, whereas killing a radio often disables the entire radio, and this can only be undone using special reprogramming or cloning tools. Do keep in mind, however, that the effect of stunning or killing does vary between radio types and manufacturers. The command used to stun, revive, or kill an analog radio is sent over the air in the form of audible tones. A similar inhibit function exists for many digital two-way radio systems, although this is usually performed using special digital messages rather than audible tones. And finally, we briefly looked at how stun, revive, and kill can be tested using a radio test set, which can send user-defined tone sequences to the radio under test. This concludes our presentation, Understanding Two-Way Radios, Stun, Revive, and Kill. If you'd like to learn more about two-way radio technologies, two-way radio testing, or radio test set instruments from Rohde & Schwarz, please see the links in the video description. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit us at rohde-schwarz.com.